Welcome to another week of our Indie Dev Showcases here on the channel. Each week I review and spotlight 6 of the many indie games we play here. And if you'd like to submit a game for a future video and stream, please get in touch. As always, the games shown are either press key submissions or demos that we find on Steam through the festivals and such. And we're beginning with the press key play of Crown Trick. This is a turn-based kind of traditional roguelite kind of game with a very beautiful kind of storybook aesthetic to it. So the game itself is played kind of similar in structure to the Shiren the Wanderer series, where you have a long-standing goal. In this case, clear each nightmare region, defeat whoever is controlling it, and save the kingdom. But each run is going to be procedurally generated in terms of room design, what items you get access to, etc., etc. Now, there is persistence in the form of getting these kinds of dream shards that will allow you to upgrade your character and services as you play for subsequent runs. Now, combat, as I said, is turn-based, and what the game does is that there's a lot in terms of synergies and how moves work in Crown Trick that we normally don't see from traditional roguelikes. So you can choose from different weapons. Each weapon has different abilities, different ranges, they may synergize unique ways, etc., etc. But you also get familiars, and you unlock them as you play through the world. Whatever familiars you have access to gives you special powers. That's the 1, 2, 3, 4 that you see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So, as you do damage to enemies, you can break them by hitting them enough times that will then stagger them and let them take more damage. And as things go on, you'll get additional artifacts which will further boost your abilities. You'll get new familiars, new weapons. Weapons and gear may also have random modifiers that will further change how they behave. You can also make use of an emergency teleport that consumes your mana, I believe, or it may recharge after X amount of turns. It's been a while since I played this one. But this is definitely a game that there's a lot going for it under the hood than you might think otherwise, especially if you just write this off as a bog standard turn-based roguelike. Now, my main issue with this game is that it can be on the hard side. Much like Shiren the Wanderer, if you don't get the right gear, or the gear that you need that synergizes what you also have access to, you're not going to win. Like, it doesn't matter how good you are at turn-based combat and reading the rules, you still need the right gear to capitalize on it. And the boss fights in this game can be very tanky because of it, having multiple phases, and it becomes a lot harder to deal with them compared to some of the more action-focused roguelikes that we've seen. But with that said, Crown Trick I think is a very well done kind of turn-based or traditional roguelike, as I said, and if you are a fan of that kind of content, then definitely give this one a check, because there is certainly a lot here and just a lot of interesting synergies and systems going on. For our next game, we have Jetboard Joust, and this is a game that is kind of described as modern retro. Essentially, what if Defender was a roguelike? And it's one of those games that you can tell very quickly how this core gameplay loop is going to play out. So each level is going to be procedurally generated. Your mission is to save all the people from these bug invaders on your kind of like Silver Surfer-esque board here. As you kill enemies, you'll gain power-ups, get upgrades, find modifiers, and all that other good roguelike stuff with things that unlock as you play. Now, what kind of separates this from, again, like the old school Defender, is that you'll have to decide what upgrades you get, and they're trying to add in that layer of persistence, or at least like a little bit more depth compared to the old arcade shooter. And you can see that with being able to choose different levels, all the unlocks, and just trying to elevate this gameplay loop as high as it can possibly go. My complaint about this game isn't that the gameplay is bad, but that I feel like there's just not enough here that's going to convince somebody to play this game over any of the other number of modern retro games, action roguelikes, and so on. But I would say that if the idea of playing Defender with a little bit more depth to it sounds like it's up your alley, then definitely give this one a check, because I think you're going to like it. But if the footage that you've seen so far has not convinced you to check this game out, then I don't think you are the right market for it. For our next game, we have Devious Dungeons 2. This is kind of set up as a very basic platformer roguelite kind of game, where you are exploring a castle that's full of devious traps and dungeons, looking for loot, as well as trying to stop whoever the big bad is. So I think the first game was released on mobile. I'm not sure this one was also as well. But the basic gameplay loop is that you're going to move from room to room. The rooms are procedurally built. Try to find the exit, get forward, make it to the next section, rinse and repeat. Now, persistence comes in the form of using the accumulated money that you find throughout the dungeons in order to upgrade your character. And each character gets different upgrades, and you're free to decide what weapons and gear you want to give them. But as with games of this kind, of course, the more money they're worth, the better they're going to be for you. And that is basically everything to Devious Dungeons 2. And much like the last game, there's nothing here that I would say is bad about the design, but it's just very limited. This is a game that it pretty much knows what it wants to be, for better and worse. And if you're looking for kind of an action roguelite kind of experience, there are other options out there, some probably even deeper than this one. So if you are a fan of this particular genre, and you've kind of exhausted all the other examples, then Devious Dungeons 2 is a good one to check out. But if you're hoping for a far meatier experience in terms of its design, then I don't think there's enough here to keep you engaged. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we have 3 more games to look at. And as always, if you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, then check out my latest offering of books. For entry-level students, we have 20 Essential Games to Study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with horror coming by the end of 2021. We turn to our first demo for this week's Spotlight, and that is Pile Up. This is a 3D platformer that is basically about sentient boxes who have to go on a venture to save the day. So as you can tell by our aesthetic here, this is all like cardboard, handmade, that kind of look and feel to it. So what's interesting about Pile Up is that the game is built around 1 to 4 player co-op, and the game will change things will rebalance and change based on how many players are currently active. Now, obviously with this being a demo, we could only play just as myself here. But the UI is kept very streamlined. You can move, jump, pick up, and put down boxes. And your key element or your key gameplay loop is going to be figuring out how to get your character to various MacGuffins and switches using placeable boxes or your friends if you're playing co-op. And this is one of those games that, again, it's not going to be the most taxing 3D platformer out there, but it was, I think, very good at what it wanted to do. And if you are looking for something you can play with friends, I would say give this one a check, because we really don't see too many 3D platformer co-op games these days. For our next game, we have Vault: Tomb of the King. And this was a demo that we played during the Summer Festival that I really enjoyed. This is a kind of top-down Lost Vikings-esque puzzle action game. If you've played games like the Lost Vikings, Twine, and so on, you should be familiar with the concept. You have 3 characters that you can swap to at any time, and you'll have to make use of each of their skills in order to solve puzzles, collect loot, and make it through a bunch of traps. Our three heroes this time are a knight, a wizard, and a thief. The knight is the strongest and can fight in melee. The wizard can kind of set off traps and hit things from long range. And the thief is the fastest character and can also get special moves, like I think they get like a grapple hook at one point. So the demo that we played is kept to like one of these starting areas. While the game is kind of puzzle focused, the gold that you see me picking up can be spent to unlock passive upgrades for the characters. And while the upgrades seem like they're going to be useful, it doesn't seem like a case where you're going to need them in order to solve the puzzles. They'll just make things easier for you as you go forward. And the game definitely looks like it's going to be on the challenging side, with lots of traps to avoid, one-hit kills for a lot of your characters, but it checkpoints very regularly. And I was enjoying this one, and I'm curious to see where they're going to go in terms of puzzle and action complexity, and where it all fits in with these three characters. So if you are a fan of kind of the Lost Vikings character swapping design and looking for something of challenge, then definitely keep an eye out for Vault: Tomb of the King when it's released hopefully later this year. For our final game of this week's Spotlight, this is the game Kinetic Edge. The footage you're seeing is taken from a demo, but we did get played the full version of it a few months later. So this is a kind of physics-driven platformer with multiple kind of ways of playing it. The idea is that we're in this neon, very technicolorly, laser-filled world, and we're going to play all kinds of weird games, from doing platforming, racing, miniature golf, and so on. And each shape that you play with basically changes your physics. So being a cube here means that I can't exactly roll all that easily. But fortunately I can do dashing and double jumps and other crazy 3D platforming maneuvers as well. And because of the physics, or the realistic physics that go into how you move around, it means things can get very crazy in terms of how objects relate to each other and the momentum that you build up. So the nice thing about this game is that it looks very clean. There's a variety of modes to play with. There's kind of like the super ultimate obstacle course that you can only have like one life to get through, as well as again racing, golf, and so on that you can play with multiple people. The problem that this game has is that there really isn't a lot here. You can play everything with multiplayer, but by yourself it's just kept very basic. Now, the game is priced very low, I think, accordingly. But if you don't have friends to play this with, I don't know if there's enough here than more than just a cursory glance at the game. So, it's an interesting concept, but as I said, it is one of those games that once I stopped playing, I didn't feel the desire to keep playing. So with that said, we're going to wrap up this week's showcase here. I would like to thank all developers who submitted games. You'll find links to everything in the description down below. If you'd like me to tickle your game for a future stream and video, please get in touch. I'm always looking for submissions. Check out our Discord and Patreon link down below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.